Last Saturday, my wife Claire attended a lavish party thrown by her friend Lisa. Before you judge, let me make it clear that I am not one of those controlling husbands. I only made one simple request, which was not to wear that miniskirt, the kind that leaves next to nothing covered. I didn't think that was too much to ask, but Claire took it as a personal challenge. I got home late from a work event and was not surprised but annoyed to find that CLA was missing. I sent her a text message asking her to dress appropriately, but there was no response. No matter what I thought, she would do what she wanted anyway. I should have known then that something was wrong. It was almost 2 a.m. when she stumbled drunkenly through the door. That's when I saw the kiss marks on her neck. So many of them. My heart sank and my stomach turned. I tried to remain calm, but I couldn't help asking what they were. She mumbled something about shutting up, and I, an independent woman, did what I wanted. She looked at me with a provocative stare, as if challenging me to say something. The smell of alcohol hit me, and the sight of the marks made my blood boil. I couldn't sleep all night, wondering who she'd been with and what she'd done in the morning. I knew I couldn't let it go. Early on Monday morning, I called my lawyer and started the divorce proceedings. Claire refused to accept it. She went into a rage, hurling abuse at me and accusing me of trying to control her life. Things got really messy. Sla refused to let go. She sent me text messages, voice messages, cried, and even went to my workplace to make a scene. I kept telling her it was over, but she wouldn't listen. I couldn't believe how much my life had been shattered just because of one night and a short skirt. The day after the divorce papers were filed, my life quickly fell apart when I wore a short skirt. Claire completely fell apart. She showed up at our house in the middle of the day, tears streaming down her face, begging me to reconsider. I could see the desperation in her eyes, but at that point I didn't care. "Please, Jack, I can explain everything." She grabbed my arm with a sob. I broke free and tried to remain calm. "Claire, explain the kiss marks. Explain your blatant disregard for everything we have built together. Explain that nothing is left." "Claire." She fell to her knees and cried even harder. "It was a mistake. I was drunk. It meant nothing." I couldn't believe her nerve. "A mistake? How many times have you made before you had those love bites? You didn't accidentally fall into someone's lips, CLA." I turned around and left her on the floor. I needed space to think, but CLA wasn't about to let me off that easily. She followed me around the house, still pleading, until finally I had to leave. I got into my car and drove to a nearby park to try and sort my thoughts. That's when my phone started to receive messages from her, the tone of which ranged from apologetic to blunt, each one more unstable than the last. "You can just leave me like that." One message said, "It's your fault, Jack, you pushed me away." Another said, "I ignored them." With each message I received, I deleted one. I know I need to be strong, but it's hard. After 8 years together, it seems unrealistic to just throw it all away overnight. But then I remember all her defiance, the way she refused to take responsibility, and when I finally got home, she was gone. I thought she might finally have come to terms with it and decided to leave me alone, but CLA had other plans. I woke up the next morning to find her sitting on the porch. She looked like she hadn't slept. She was a mess. Her makeup was smudged. Her hair was a mess. "You can do this to me, Jack. You can throw it all away," she said, her voice shaking. I took a deep breath. "Clay, you did this. You made the choice, and now you have to live with the consequences." She stood up, her eyes blazing with anger. "You think you're perfect? You think you never make mistakes? You're not a saint, Jack. This is the last straw. I can't stand there and listen to her trying to put the blame on me. I never betrayed you, Claire. I never let you down." That's why she stormed off. She shouted that this isn't over, Jack, and you'll regret it. She was telling the truth. For the next few weeks, Claire was everywhere I went, work, the gym, even the grocery store, like she had a sixth sense for where I was. She made a big scene, trying to make me look like the bad guy. My colleagues and friends started to notice and ask what was going on. "What's wrong with CLA?" one of my colleagues asked me. I shrugged and tried to brush it off. We were going through a tough time, but it was more than that. Claire started spreading rumors about me, telling everyone that I cheated on her, that I was controlling and abusive. It was like living a nightmare. I thought my friends were there for me, but they started looking at me strangely and distancing themselves from me. Then one night, I got a call from Lisa, the friend who had thrown the party. "Jack, I think you need to know," she said, her voice hesitant. I gathered my strength. What was it? Lisa Clark told everyone that you hit her and that you made her like this. I felt the blood drain from my face. This isn't true. You know me, Lisa. I would never. I know, Jack. I just thought you should know what she said. The next day, I met with my lawyer. We needed to speed up the divorce. I told him that she had ruined my life. He nodded, understanding. We'll do everything we can, Jack, but you need to gather evidence, record her every word and action, and we can use that in court. I started recording everything, documenting her erratic behavior, saving her text messages and voicemails. It was exhausting, but I knew it was the only way to protect myself. Just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, one night CLA arrived at my house with a policeman, claiming I had hit her. I was shocked, but kept calm, showed the officer my records and explained the situation. Fortunately, the officer believed me and left, but the damage had already been done. I knew this was just the beginning. Claire would not give up easily. She was determined to make my life a living hell, and I had to be prepared for anything that came next. After the police came that night, I realized that Claire would stop at nothing, and it woke me up. I knew I had to be more vigilant than ever. Her behavior became increasingly unpredictable and dangerous. I installed surveillance cameras around the house and made sure to lock everything every night. It was like living in a fortress, but it gave me peace of mind. A few days later, I got a call from my friend Mark. "Hey Jack, you might want to sit down for this," he said, sounding serious. "What's wrong now?" I asked, already dreading his answer. "Claire told someone you're addicted to drugs. She put it all on social media, and my heart broke." "Are you serious? How could she just make up such a lie? She's crazy. You have to do something or things will get out of hand." I knew he was right, but what could I do? Claw's lie spread like wildfire, burning down everything in its path. I decided to confront her, but I had to be careful. I didn't want to give her any more opportunities to attack me. That evening I texted her and asked if we could meet in a public place to talk. She agreed. We met at a local cafe. She looked different, almost manic, her eyes darting around as if expecting something. "Claire, you have to stop this," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "You're destroying both of our lives." She let out a hollow, bitter laugh. "You think I'm destroying our lives? You, Jack, you started this. You filed for divorce. You cheated on me. What was I supposed to do? Just let it happen." She leaned forward, her expression stiffening. "You don't know what I've been through, Jack. You pushed me away and made me feel worthless." I sighed, realizing the futility of this conversation. "Claire, it's over. You need to move on, find someone else, get help, whatever it takes. But you will not attack me again." She suddenly stood up and her chair fell over. "You will regret this, Jack, I promise you." I felt a sense of dread as she stormed out of the cafe. CLA was like a time bomb, and I had no idea what she was going to do next. Over the next few weeks, I was busy dealing with court summonses, meetings with lawyers, and dealing with the consequences of CLA's lies. Colleagues started avoiding me. I felt angry and tired as people whispered behind my back, but I persevered, knowing I had to. One evening, I received a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but my intuition told me to pick up the phone. "Hello, Jack, it's Lisa." I was surprised. We hadn't spoken since the party. "Hey, Lisa, what's up? I have something to tell you. It's about Claire." "What?" I braced myself for worse news. "She's having an affair with my husband." The words hit me like a ton of bricks. "Are you sure?" "Yes, I found text messages between them. It's been going on for months." I felt a mixture of anger and relief. Anger at the betrayal, but relief because it explained so much. "Thanks for telling me, Lisa. I'm sorry you've been through this. It's okay, I just thought you should know, and maybe it'll help in court." I hung up the phone, my mind racing. This is really a game. I immediately called my lawyer, who agreed that this could be beneficial for you. "Jack, we need to get this information and present it in court in the next few days." Lisa sent me all the information. The message was clear. There was no doubt that the affair was painful, but it was exactly what I needed to prove my case. The day of the court hearing finally arrived, and I walked into the courtroom with a renewed sense of determination. Claire was there, smug and confident, but her demeanor changed immediately when we produced evidence of her affair with Lisa. She tried to defend herself, but it was clear she was caught out. The judge ruled in my favor, granting the divorce and awarding me full custody of the children. Claire was furious, but there was nothing she could do. Her lies had finally been exposed. But the story didn't end there. Claire didn't end her revenge there. She started showing up at my house again, threatening and causing chaos. I had to get a restraining order to keep her away, but even that couldn't stop her. One night, I woke up to the sound of someone trying to break into my house. I grabbed my phone and called the police. But by the time they arrived, CLA had disappeared. Security footage showed her trying to break in, eyes wild. The police took it very seriously and used the restraining order to arrest Claire and charge her with breaking and entering. It was a small victory, but I felt it was a step in the right direction. As time passed, I began to rebuild my life, reconnecting with friends and family. They had grown distant because of Claire's lies. It wasn't easy, but I slowly began to heal after Claire's arrest. I thought things could finally settle down, but as usual, I underestimated her resilience. Rumors were rife, and I was on constant alert, wondering what she would do next. I had never felt so alone, but just when I thought I was on my own, unexpected allies appeared. One afternoon, I received a call from an old friend, Sarah. We hadn't spoken much since university, but we had always got on well. "Hey, Jack, I heard about what happened recently. Do you want to meet for a coffee and talk about it?" We met at a small local restaurant. She listened intently as I told her about the crazy past few months, occasionally shaking her head in disbelief. "Jack, this is crazy. Claire has always liked the dramatic, but this was on another level. Tell me about it," I said, sipping my coffee. "I don't even know what to do anymore. Documenting everything and involving a lawyer was the right thing to do, but you can face this alone, and you need support." Sarah and I started spending more time together, and she introduced me to a support group that helps people deal with toxic relationships. It was a game-changing experience. Hearing other people's stories and realizing that I wasn't alone gave me a long-lost strength. Meanwhile, Claire continued her attacks on me, and one afternoon she caused a huge scene by turning up at my workplace. She screamed about how I had ruined her life and demanded to speak to my boss. Luckily, my colleagues were starting to see her for what she was, and security escorted her out. But the real turning point came when I received a call from an unfamiliar number. "Hello, Jack, this is Detective Collins from the local police station. We've been investigating some recent activity in connection with your ex-wife, Claire." My heart skipped a beat. "What kind of activity?" "We've received multiple reports of harassment and threats, all directed at Claire. We'd like you to come down to the station to discuss this further." When I arrived at the police station, Detective Collins showed me a folder full of complaints and evidence. Claire wasn't just harassing me, she was harassing Lisa, her family, and even my colleagues. The detective explained that they were building a case against Claire for stalking and harassment. "This is serious, Jack. We believe she has been using multiple phone numbers and fake social media accounts to continue attacking us. We are issuing a restraining order against her to all concerned." Although it was stressful, I felt relieved to know that the authorities were taking action. Detective Collins assured me that they would do everything they could to stop Claire from causing further harm. The restraining order is now in effect. CLA's pranks start to subside, but I know I can't let my guard down completely. I continue to stay in touch with my support group and lean on Sarah and new friends. Friends for strength. One night, I get a call from Lisa. "Jack, you won't believe it. Claire's been arrested again." "What happened?" "Had broken into her ex-boyfriend's house and tried to attack him. The police caught her in the act. It was shocking, but not entirely surprising. CLA had clearly lost control. The news spread quickly, and people suddenly began to see her for what she really was. The rumors and lies she had spread began to lose their effect, and as CLA faced the legal consequences, I began to feel a sense of relief. I focused on rebuilding my life and enjoying the peace that had come with her departure. Sarah and I grew closer, and for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful about the future. But the story doesn't end there. Claire's final desperate act will prove to be the most shocking of all. She reveals secrets I never imagined and tests my resolve in ways I never could have imagined. With Claire behind bars, I finally feel like I can breathe again. As surreal as it all is, I remain vigilant to KLA's unpredictability. Life begins to settle into a new normal. Sarah and I grow closer, and my support group becomes a source of strength and comfort. One night, I received a call from Detective Collins. "Jack, we need you to come down to the station. There's something you need to see." I went to the police station with trepidation. When I arrived, Detective Collins took me into a small room and handed me a file that had been found among Keele's belongings. He looked serious, and when I opened the file, my heart stopped. Inside were dozens of letters written by CLA to different people. Some I knew, some I didn't. But it wasn't just the letters that shocked me, it was what they said. CLA had meticulously documented her affairs, describing in detail every sadness, every lie, and every plot to manipulate the people around her. I scanned the letters, my hands shaking, when one in particular caught my eye. It was addressed to Lisa's husband, Paul. "Paul, I know this is risky, but I can stop thinking about you. Jack is, as usual, oblivious. We need to be more careful, but if you're willing, I'm willing to take the risk. We can meet next week at the usual place. I can't wait to feel your hands on me again." I felt a wave of anger and betrayal. Paul, one of my closest friends, had been sleeping with my wife behind my back. I was in a daze, but as I continued reading the letter, things got even worse. Claire described in detail a plan to frame me. She has been gathering evidence to back up her claims, intending to use it to destroy me if I ever try to leave her. Jack is such an idiot he will never realize. There is enough evidence that I will go to the police, and he will lose everything. His job, his friends, his freedom, and then maybe he will realize he should treat me better. I feel sick. Claire has been plotting to destroy me for years, and it is chilling to read her words, knowing she is so close to succeeding. Detective Collins put a hand on my shoulder. "I know this is hard to hear, Jack, but these letters are crucial. They not only prove her guilt but also clear your name. We will use them in court." The day of the court hearing arrived. I walked into the courtroom with a renewed sense of determination. Claire looked more defeated than ever. Her confidence had been replaced by a desperate look in her eyes. The evidence we presented was irrefutable. The letters, combined with the witness statements and security footage, painted a damning picture of Claire's deceit and manipulation. The judge ruled in my favor, finally granting the divorce and issuing a restraining order against Claire. She was sentenced to several years in prison for harassment, stalking, and attempted fraud. A sense of relief washed over me as the gavel came down. It was finally over, but Claire's actions had left me deeply scarred. I struggled to rebuild my life and overcome the lingering effects of the betrayal and lies. My relationships with friends and family became strained, and it took time to repair the damage. Sarah was there for me, she was there for me, and helped me through the emotional roller coaster and find some sense of normality. We spent more and more time together, and our bond grew stronger. It wasn't long before we started dating, and for the first time in years I felt truly happy. Life slowly began to move forward. I found solace in a support group, sharing my story and listening to the stories of others who had been through similar experiences. It helped me to deal with the trauma and find relief. But just when I thought I had got over Kelly, she pulled one last stunt from her prison cell. She started writing letters to mutual friends, claiming that she had found God and had turned over a new leaf. She begged forgiveness, portraying herself as a victim of her mental illness. Most people saw through her charade, but a few gullible people fell for it. They reached out to me, urging me to forgive her and move on. Frustrated but refusing to let CLA continue to control my life, I focused on the future, with Sarah by my side, while CLA was locked up in prison and the restraining order was strictly enforced. I felt a weight lift from my shoulders, but the damage she had caused was far-reaching, impacting my reputation, relationships, and mental health. The journey of rebuilding my life had only just begun. Sarah was my anchor during this time, helping me to stay grounded and focused on the future. We spent a lot of time talking and laughing, rediscovering the simple joys of life. It was a slow process, but with her support, I began to heal. One day, while having lunch at our favorite steakhouse, Sarah suggested an idea. "Jack, have you considered therapy?" I hesitated. I didn't know. I always dealt with things on my own. Sarah reached across the table and took my hand. "After what you've been through, there's no shame in seeking help. It might be helpful to talk to someone who can help you deal with everything." After some thought, I decided to give it a try. I found a therapist who specialized in trauma and relationships and started weekly therapy sessions. At first, it was hard to speak openly about my experiences and confront my emotions, but gradually I began to benefit from it. I came to understand the depth of CLA's manipulation and how it had affected my therapy. I learned techniques to cope with lingering anxiety and trust issues. I also began to rebuild my self-esteem, which had been destroyed by Kiele's relentless attacks. I feel empowered to take control of my mental health and work towards a better future. Meanwhile, Sarah and I have grown closer and our relationship has become beautiful and genuine. She is patient and understanding and never forces me to move faster. This is in stark contrast to the chaos and pain I experienced when I was with CLA. It has been almost a year since CLA was arrested. I feel ready to take the next step. I have decided to sell the house, as it holds too many painful memories. Sarah and I started looking for a new place together, somewhere we could make our own memories and create a future. When we moved, I found a box full of old photos and mementos, all of them a testament to my life with Claire. At first I wanted to throw them all away, but my therapist suggested a different approach, a ritual of farewell, looking at the objects, acknowledging the past, and then letting go. It sounded a bit hokey, but I decided to give it a try. One evening, Sarah and I sat down, opened the boxes, and went through each item, remembering the good times and acknowledging the bad. It was very emotional, but in the end, we burned the photos and letters, watching the flames consume the remnants of my past. As the fire died down, I felt a sense of peace, as if a chapter in my life had finally been turned and made way for a new one. Sarah put her arms around me, and we stood there in silence, feeling the weight of the past being carried away. But just when I thought it was all in the past, Claire managed to make a last move from prison. She filed an appeal claiming that she was forced to commit the crime due to her mental illness. Although the chances of winning were slim, the thought of her getting out of prison early sent a shiver down my spine. I contacted Detective Collins and my lawyer to prepare for the worst. We gathered all the evidence to defend her appeal. When the court date was set, I felt a familiar fear. On the day of the trial, I walked into the courtroom with Sarah. Claire looked haggard and dejected, nothing like her old self. She defended her case, but it was clear that she had no remorse for her actions. Her appeal was rejected, and she was sent back to prison to serve her full sentence. As we left the courtroom, I felt a new sense of finality. Claire's last attempt to destroy my life had failed, and I could finally move on with my life without fear. That night, Sarah and I celebrated our new beginning and our future free from Claire's shadow. Life slowly returned to normal. I threw myself into my work, reconnected with old friends, and continued with my therapy. Sarah and I moved into our new home and created a space full of love and laughter. It wasn't always easy, but together we faced every challenge and grew stronger as a couple. One sunny afternoon, Sarah and I were having a picnic in the backyard when she looked at me with a twinkle in her eye and said, "Jack, I have something to tell you." "What is it?" I asked curiously. She smiled and took my hand. "I'm pregnant." The words flooded over me like a tide, and I was ecstatic. I pulled her into a hug. Tears of happiness flooded my face. "We're going to be parents," I whispered, and for the first time I felt a sense of fulfillment I'd never known before. I realized that despite the pain and betrayal, I feel stronger than ever. Clay's behavior has almost destroyed me, but at the same time it has led me to true happiness and love. The future is bright, and I am ready for it. Stay tuned for Part 7, where I will face the challenges of becoming a father and past events from Claire's past resurface, testing my resolve and the cohesion of our new family. Learning that Sarah was pregnant was the best news I had ever received. It felt like a new chapter was about to begin, full of hope and excitement. We started making plans for the baby, transforming the spare room into a nursery, picking out names and attending antenatal classes. Life seemed to be finally moving in a positive direction. But just as we were preparing for our new arrival, unexpected events from Claire's past started to surface, threatening our new life. One afternoon, I received a call from Claire's mother, Maggie, who we hadn't spoken to since the divorce. Hearing her voice brought back so many memories. "Jack, I know this is sudden, but I need to talk to you about Claire." Her voice was urgent. I hesitated. "Maggie, I don't know if you want to hear what I have to say, but it's important." I reluctantly agreed to meet her. We met at a quiet restaurant. I could tell something was wrong as soon as I saw her. She looked both panicked and worried, the complete opposite of the composed and calm woman I remembered. "Jack, I'm sorry to involve you, but Claire has been writing to me from prison." Maggie began to tremble slightly, and she said that she had found evidence that could reduce her sentence. I felt a sharp pain in my stomach. "What kind of evidence?" Maggie said that she had evidence that someone had manipulated her into doing those terrible things. She hoped that I would help her expose the truth. I shook my head. Maggie, I don't know what to say. Claire has already caused so much harm, and I don't think I can get involved. I understand, Jack, but Claire mentioned something more. She mentioned a man called Paul, and she said that Paul was involved in everything. The name Paul shocked me. He was the man Claire had an affair with, Lisa's husband. Things were beginning to make sense, and it made me feel uneasy. Maggie, Paul had an affair with Claire Heek. He's not a nice man. Her eyes widened in shock. I knew nothing about it, but Claire insisted that Paul was involved in her behavior. She said that Paul controlled her and manipulated her into doing those things. It sounded like a carefully constructed lie from Claire, but I couldn't ignore the possibility. If Paul was really involved, it would explain a lot about what Claire was doing. I decided to find out what was going on. I contacted Lisa and explained the situation to her. She was angry, but agreed to help together. We began investigating Paul's background, trying to find any connection between him and Claire's behavior. What we found was more shocking than I could have imagined. Paul has a history of manipulating and controlling women. There have been reports of him harassing and abusing women in previous relationships. It seems that CLA was not his first victim. Armed with this new information, I contacted Detective Collins. I think Claire's story is more complicated than we thought. Paul may have manipulated her. Collins was initially skeptical, but when we presented the evidence, he began to see a pattern which changed things. Jack, we need to investigate further, but if Paul did manipulate CLA, it could affect her sentence. Despite the looming uncertainty, Sarah and I focused on preparing for the baby. We tried to stay positive and enjoy this special time. Our relationship became stronger as we faced the challenges together. A few weeks later, Detective Collins called with an update. Jack, we've confirmed that Paul was involved in manipulating Claire, using her weaknesses to control her behavior. We're working hard to bring him to justice. It was a bittersweet moment. Claire's actions were still unforgivable, but knowing she'd been manipulated made it more complicated. I felt a mixture of anger and compassion. The court reopened Claire's case, and with the new evidence, her sentence was reduced. She still had to serve her sentence, but good behavior meant she could be released early. It was a small victory, but it felt like a step towards closure. A few months later, Sarah and I welcomed our beautiful baby girl. When I held her for the first time, I felt a deep sense of love and responsibility. This little being represented a new beginning, an opportunity to create something positive out of the chaos. We named her Grace, a symbol of the grace we found in life. Despite the hardships, the process of raising a child was full of joy and challenges. Every moment with Grace felt like a gift, but life has a way of throwing curveballs. One evening, as we were beginning to settle into our new lives, I received a letter from Claire. She had been released early for good behavior and wanted to see me. She claimed to have turned over a new leaf and wanted to make amends. I was torn. On the one hand, I wanted to move on and forget the past, but on the other, I felt a responsibility to hear her out. After discussing it with Sarah, we decided to meet Claire together. We met in a park, a neutral place where we could see LA look different, more composed, but there was sadness in her eyes that I hadn't seen before. Jack, Sarah, thank you for agreeing to meet me. Her voice was sincere and firm. I know I've caused you both a lot of pain, and I'm truly sorry. Sarah and I listened as CLA explained her story, admitting her mistakes and taking responsibility. She spoke of the manipulation Paul had subjected her to and how it had distorted her sense of reality. Forgive, Claire said, her eyes filling with tears. I just want you to know that I'm trying to make things right for myself and for everyone I've hurt. It was a difficult conversation, but I felt a sense of relief at having heard Claire's remorse and seen her efforts to change. I didn't expect it to erase the past, but it allowed me to move forward without the burden of unresolved anger. Just as we parted ways, I felt a strange calm. A page had finally been turned, and a new chapter was about to begin. Sarah and I returned to Grace's home, ready to embrace the future with open arms. Grace's life was everything I had ever dreamed of. Together, Sarah and I experienced the ups and downs of parenthood, and our bond grew stronger as we adjusted to the demands of our little one. Grace is a happy, inquisitive baby, and every day with her is a gift. Just when I think things are finally getting back on track, an unexpected visitor from CLA's past turns up at our doorstep. threatening to upset our peace once again. One Saturday morning, there's a knock at the door. I open the door to find a woman in her early 30s, looking anxious and a little overwhelmed. She introduced herself as Rachel, a former colleague of CLA's from many years ago. "Jack, I know this is sudden, but I need to talk to you about CLA." Her voice trembled slightly, she said. I invited her in, not knowing what to expect. Sarah came into the living room, and Grace snuggled into her arms. Rachel took a deep breath and began to tell her story. "I used to work with CLA and we were friends for a while, but we lost touch recently. I recently had some personal problems and found some old letters that CLA had written to me. In the letters, she mentioned a man named Paul and how he manipulated her. Even back then, my heart sank. The name Paul seemed to haunt me, linked to CLA's turbulent connection. Rachel handed me a stack of letters, and as I read them, I realized that CLA had been under the influence of Paul long before I knew. In one letter, Claire wrote that Paul would make subtle suggestions, implanting ideas in her mind that slowly eroded her confidence. He had a way of making her feel grateful to him, controlling her behavior through emotional manipulation. Reading these letters is like putting together a jigsaw puzzle. Paul S.'s control over CLA was much stronger and more insidious than I realized. I felt a wave of anger towards him, and sadness for CLA well up again. "Why are you telling us all this now?" Sarah asked tenderly, sensing Rachel's pain. Rachel lowered her head, tears welling up in her eyes. "Because I've been through something similar, manipulated by someone I trusted. It almost destroyed me. I want you to know the truth, to understand what Claire went through. Maybe it will help you find some peace." Her words hit me hard. I've spent too much time resenting CLA's actions, but seeing how much influence Paul had, I realize how deep she was in. It doesn't excuse her actions, but it does provide a context that I didn't fully understand before. "Thank you, Rachel," I said excitedly, that it meant a lot to me. "I wish CLA had told me earlier. Maybe things would have been different." Rachel nodded, wiping away tears. "I hope this brings you some relief. CLA isn't a bad person. She just got lost after Rachel left." Sarah and I sat there silently digesting what we had learned. Grace Seddon in Sarah's arms epitomized the new life we had built together, brief but profound. Sarah finally broke the silence and said, "Yes, I agree, but I'm glad Rachel came. It helps to understand TLA's behavior, even if it doesn't change what has happened." Sarah reached out and took my hand. "We've come so far, Jack. We've become stronger because we've been through this, and now we can focus on our future." Her words were comforting. We'd weathered the storm, and now it was time to move forward. I decided to visit CLA in prison one last time to share my experiences and find answers for myself. When I arrived at the prison, CLA was surprised to see me. We sat opposite each other, the heavy atmosphere of the visiting room weighing on us. I found out more about Paul. I began to watch her reaction carefully. Her eyes widened and she nodded slowly. "He manipulated you for a long time, didn't he?" Tears in CLA's eyes. "Yes, he did. I'm so scared, Jack. I don't know how to get out of this." I nod, feeling a mixture of sadness and relief. "Rachel showed me the letter you wrote. I wish you'd told me earlier. Maybe we could have done something." CLA wipes her eyes, trying to compose herself. I'm ashamed. I don't want you to see how weak I am." "You weren't trapped for a week, Claire. You were trapped. But you have a chance to start again now, to become better." She looked at me, gratitude and regret mingling. "Thank you, Jack. I'm really sorry for putting you through all this." When I left the prison that day, I felt a great sense of relief, as if the burden I had carried for years had finally been lifted. Claire. The final chapter in my life had finally been turned, and I was ready to embrace the future with open arms. Back home, I focused on the joys and challenges of parenthood. Grace was growing up quickly, and each milestone brought new excitement. Sarah and I settled into a comfortable routine, balancing work, family, and our relationship, but life always had a way of throwing a curveball. One evening, as we prepared dinner, my phone rang. It was Detective Collins J. We arrested Paul for trying to manipulate another woman, but things didn't get out of hand and she came forward. He faces serious charges. Now the final piece of the puzzle has finally fallen into place. Paul is finally being held accountable for his actions. I feel a sense of justice knowing that he can never hurt anyone again. Sarah and I sit down to dinner. I look around the table at my family, and despite all the challenges and heartache we've been through, together we've created some beautiful moments. Our past has not defined us, but shaped us, making us stronger and more resilient. Stay tuned for Part 9, where we continue to create our future, embracing new adventures and unexpected surprises, and ultimately, the ultimate test of family love and resilience. With Paul behind bars, Claire's chapter in life was finally over, and I could finally breathe a sigh of relief. Sarah and I focused on raising Grace and enjoying the sweet moments in life. But as we know, life always tests us when we least expect it. One sunny afternoon, we decided to take Grace to the park, and I felt deeply happy as I watched her toddle after the butterflies and giggled. Sarah and I sat on the bench holding hands, immersed in the tranquility of the moment as we watched Grace play. I noticed a man approaching us. He looked a little familiar, but I couldn't be sure. He came straight towards us, his face set in a determined expression, and my heart began to race. "Who is he?" "Jack Sarah," he asked, pausing a few steps. "Yes," I answered cautiously. "My name is Michael, Claire's brother." The name hit me like a ton of bricks. Claire had mentioned her brother a few times, but I had never met him. He had always lived out of state, and rarely been involved in her life. "Michael, what are you doing here?" Sarah asked, sensing the tension. "I'm sorry to turn up out of the blue, but I need to talk to you," he said with a sense of heaviness in his voice. "Claire is dying." The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. I felt the ground being pulled from under my feet. "Claire is dying. What happened?" I managed to ask in a barely audible voice. "A few months ago, she was diagnosed with terminal cancer. She didn't want to tell anyone, but as her condition progressed, she realized she needed to make amends, and she asked me to find you and take you to see her." I glanced at Sarah, who gave me a supportive nod. "Of course," she said. "Jack, you need to go." Michael gave us the details, and the next day I found myself driving to the hospital, heavy-hearted. Celia had caused so much suffering, but knowing she was facing her final days, I felt a mixture of sadness and compassion. She deserved the chance to be at peace. When I arrived, Michael met me at the door and showed me to Claire's room. She looked weak and tired, a far cry from the person I remembered. But when she saw me, her eyes lit up. "Jack," she said weakly, a smile creasing the corners of her mouth. "Hello, Claire," I replied, sitting down beside her bed. "Thank you for coming to see me. I wasn't sure you would come, I almost didn't. I admit it, but I came." She nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "Jack, I'm so sorry for everything. I know I've said it before, but I need you to know how sorry I am. I made a lot of mistakes. I know, Claire. I know you were manipulated, but you also made choices. It was hard, but I've moved on. We've both moved on." She held out a trembling hand, and I took it, feeling the frailty of her grip. "I'm glad you found happiness. You deserve it." We talked for a while, reminiscing about the good times and acknowledging that although difficult, the conversation was necessary. In the end, I felt a sense of long overdue closure. As I left the hospital, I felt a strange mixture of emotions. Claire was dying, and although she had caused me so much pain, I couldn't help but feel a deep sadness for her. She had been part of my life, and her passing marked the end of my turbulent hometown life. Sarah and I continued to focus on our family. Grace grew up, with new milestones and joys every day. We celebrated her first birthday with close friends and family, treasuring the moments of laughter and love. One evening, as Sarah and I put Grace to bed, my phone rang. "Michael, Jack, Claire died this afternoon. She was peaceful. She wanted me to thank you for visiting her." My throat closed up. "Thank you for letting me know about Michael. I'm glad I got to see her after I hung up the phone." After I hung up the phone, Sarah put her arms around me and asked how I felt. I admitted that I was relieved, but also felt a sense of relief. She was at peace now, and so was I. We stood in silence, embracing, grateful for the love and stability we had shared. But the challenges of life were not over yet. A few weeks later, I received a letter from KLA's estate attorney, who had left a portion of the estate to Grace, along with a letter to be read when she was old enough. It was the ultimate expression of love and regret, a way to make amends even after Claire's death. Sarah and I discussed it, carefully decided to accept the inheritance on Grace's behalf. We will leave the letter with her, making sure she can read it when she grows up. As we got back to our daily lives, An unexpected opportunity arose. Sarah got a job offer in another city. It was a chance for her career to develop, and it was a big decision, but we agreed it was the right one. We packed our bags, said goodbye to friends and family, and started a new chapter in a new city. It was an exciting and nerve-wracking time, but we faced it together, confident in our love for each other and our resilience. Life in the new city was full of energy and hope. Sarah thrived in her new job, and I found fulfilling work that allowed me to spend more time with Grace. We made new friends and built a community that supported us. But just as we were getting our feet under us, an unexpected visitor arrived at our doorstep. It was Paul, fresh out of prison, looking very contrite and seeking forgiveness. Seeing Paul at our doorstep was like a nightmare come true. I never expected to see him again, let alone him standing there seeking redemption. Sarah and I exchanged a nervous glance. Then I stepped outside to speak to him. "Paul, what are you doing here?" I asked, keeping my voice calm. "I know the last person you want to see is me, Jack." He started to speak with remorse in his voice. "But I need to apologize to you and to Sarah. I did a lot of thinking while I was in prison, and I realized how much pain I have caused Sarah." She stepped out and stood next to me. Her expression was defiant. "Paul, you have not only caused pain, you destroyed lives. Why should we believe a word you say?" Paul lowered his head, clearly struggling to control his emotions. "I understand your skepticism, but I'm not here to make excuses for myself. I just want the chance to make amends, if that's possible." I took a deep breath and felt the weight of everything hit me. "Paul, I appreciate you trying to take responsibility, but your actions have had serious consequences. Claire's life is ruined, and we're still picking up the pieces." He nodded, tears in his eyes. "I know. I'm really sorry." "I'm not. Forgive. Just hope to have the opportunity to do my best to help." We stood in silence. The atmosphere was tense. Finally, Sarah spoke. "We need time to deal with this, Paul. We're not ready to just move on with our lives and forget about everything." Paul nodded. "I understand. If there's anything I can do to help, please let me know. I'll leave you my contact details." He handed me a piece of paper with his phone number and address on it, then turned and left. I felt a mixture of emotions, anger, sadness, and a glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, people could change in the next few days. Sarah and I discussed Paul's visit at length. We discussed the possibility of redemption and what it would mean for us to let go of the past. It was a difficult conversation, but we both knew that clinging to anger and resentment would not ultimately help us move forward. We decided to take things slowly and reached out to Paul, carefully integrating him into our lives in small ways. He attended therapy and support groups, worked hard to rebuild his life, and proved that he really wanted to change. Meanwhile, our lives in our new city continued to blossom. Grace was growing up quickly, and we cherished every moment together. Sarah excelled at work. I found fulfillment in my work and enjoyed spending quality time with my daughter. One evening, as we put Grace to bed, she looked at us with her big, innocent eyes and asked, "Mommy, Daddy, why are you sad?" Her question caught us off guard. We hadn't realized that our inner struggles had become apparent to Sarah. I exchanged a look with her and realized that we needed to resolve our emotions, not just for ourselves, but for Grace too. "Sweetheart, sometimes Mommy and Daddy have a lot on their minds," Sarah said gently. "But we're fine, we're here for you, and we love you very much." Grace nodded contentedly and fell back asleep. Sarah and I sat on the sofa, embraced each other, and talked about everything we had been through together. "We've come so far," Sarah said, her voice soft. "We have faced so many challenges, but we are still here, stronger than ever." I nodded, full of gratitude for all we had created together, and that we would continue to move forward, whatever the future held. Over the next few months, Paul continued to work hard to make amends and gradually earned our trust. He found a job and started volunteering at the local shelter, helping. It was a slow process, but his sincere efforts at change were evident. One day, Paul asked if he could meet Grace Sarah, and after discussing it with him, I decided to allow it under careful supervision. It was a touching meeting, but it also felt like a step towards healing. As Grace got older, we told her the truth about our past in a way that was age-appropriate. We wanted her to understand that people make mistakes, but that they can also change and find redemption. Life continues to bring its ups and downs, but together we face each challenge and come out stronger as a family. We have learned to forgive, to let go of the past, and to embrace the future with hope and resilience. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, Sarah turned to me and said, "Jack, I'm so proud of us. We've been through so much, but we've created something beautiful out of it." I smile, feeling deeply satisfied. We will continue to work hard, building up day by day, ultimately not just to weather the storms of life, but also to find the strength to rebuild, to learn forgiveness and selfless love. Our journey has been full of trials, but it has also brought us closer together, creating bonds that no force can break. As we hold hands, look out at the horizon and feel the warmth of the setting sun, we know that no matter what challenges lie ahead, we will face them together. Our story is one of resilience, redemption, and unbreakable love.